Paul Manafort got a little knock on the door the other day, huh?
A big knock, it seems.
Yeah.
Pre-dawn FBI raid instructed by Bob Mueller's special counsel team, which I could think of far better ways to be woken up in the middle of the night than by the FBI raiding your apartment.
So why would they, and this came the morning after he testified in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee. I mean,
Right,
so what does this say? Tell us that he said things that they thought, oh, man, we better grab those documents, right?
Well, so there's speculation that this suggests that Paul Manafort didn't turn over certain documents that were of interest, but Jason Maloney, his spokesman, has emailed me saying, not only confirming that the FBI raid happened, but that, Paul has been cooperative throughout the process. And he argued that, even during this FBI raid, Paul Manafort was very cooperative with law enforcement, meaning he turned over the documents that they asked. What we do know that was different about this raid is that they collected tax documents and foreign banking records. So that's totally different than anything else they had collected. And this also suggests that the investigation on Paul Manafort is expanding, specifically looking at whether or not there could be any criminal charges against the Federal Banking Secrecy Act, which essentially requires Americans to disclose whether or not they have any accounts in foreign banks, which apparently Paul Manafort does, considering they collected these documents.
Right. So it also tells us, right, that this investigation is not winding down.
It's not. It's intensifying, and I think Trump
ramping
feels
up,
that.
if anything. Yeah.
Right, and expanding geographically. There was that grand jury that was established in Alexandria, I believe, specifically for Paul Manafort. Now we all know we have this new one in D.C., which is looking at Trump Jr. and Trump's family, his inner circle. It's quickly intensifying and expanding and sort of cutting off oxygen, I think, from the White House and everything else they're focusing on.
Right. So that's why Donald Trump is talking about pardons, maybe, because he sees he hears footsteps.
Right. I think, and we can clearly see this this increase in pressure felt by Donald Trump because of this investigation getting closer and closer to him and his inner circle via his tweets. Right. He goes on these frequent Twitter rants these days early in the morning, which isn't necessarily new, but the frequency of them and how quickly they're happening is new. And just the way that he's talking about the pardons, the way that he attacked Jeff Sessions, you see him lashing out in these various ways. And to me, that suggests he's feeling this increased pressure because of Bob Mueller's investigation.
We don't know how the FBI operates, but it does seem that, this idea of raiding his house pre-dawn, rather than just calling his attorney and saying, these are the documents we want, please turn them over, right?
Right.
Or please bring these documents down to our office at 10 o'clock this morning. We'll have a little meeting in the conference room or whatever. This is kind of the way you go after a terrorist or
it's
some
very
serious criminal.
Movie-like or dramatic. But they were acting on a search warrant, which again suggests perhaps Paul Manafort wasn't as cooperative as we've been told.
Right. So there was also a story this week earlier that, and I think the president's attorney confirmed this, that while publicly he's been condemning this Russia investigation and saying, and the Manafort investigation, it's the biggest witch hunt we've ever seen. It's all fake. There's nothing to it at all. They ought to just shut it down because there's nothing there. That he's been sending little private notes to Robert Mueller, little love notes to Mueller about how much he appreciates the work that he's doing, how fair he is.
It's so bizarre. I think that's the only word I can use to describe it.
It is, isn't it?
It's bizarre, but then if you take a step back and think about everything we know or we think we know about Donald Trump based on his past actions, he's a schmoozer. He knows how to appease people and tell them what they want to hear. Whether that's in a tweet or in person or in these sort of secret private messages between him and Bob Mueller. When I read that report, I don't know if it was Washington Post or the New York Times, about these communications between Trump and Bob Mueller, it read to me like he thought sending these little notes of affection or appreciation would coerce him into being nicer.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's just hard to read.
It is.
And if you're Mueller, I'm sure Mueller wonders, what the hell's going on? He turns on the TV and he sees Trump accusing him of conducting this witch hunt, wasting all this time and all this money.
Right.
And then and then the secretary brings out, we have a little note here from the White House.
Right. Well, and
with the presidential seal on it saying, "Dear Bob, I just want you to know you're doing a great job. Love, Don."
Right. I mean, also it goes back to what he harped on Hillary Clinton for during the election, which was this whole idea of public thoughts versus private thoughts. And this is a clear example of him having two totally competing public and private thoughts about something that is a very serious matter and that is quickly encroaching on his personal space, his family, his finances, and who knows what in the coming months.
Who else is the FBI looking at, the Mueller team?
Well, obviously Donald Trump Jr. So that was the big news from the grand jury that I think became quickly clear, right? It's not surprising that he impaneled a grand jury. That happened in Whitewater and Watergate. That's not surprising. What's surprising is that it now confirms that he's looking at Trump Jr. And his meeting with the Russian lawyer in June of 2016. Jared Kushner was also there, so he will likely be swept up in this. Obviously, Paul Manafort. And the thing with Watergate was that it sort of got to this point of like, follow the money and you'll see what happens. And we kind of see that happening with Paul Manafort. Jared Kushner obviously has a lot of financial situations that could be of interest simply because he's dealt with foreign contacts in those situations. So the fact that they're looking at that same thing with Paul Manafort and this Trump Jr. meeting suggests that Jared Kushner's finances could certainly be next. They're looking at Trump's finances.
And Michael Flynn?
Michael Flynn, yes. I think he could definitely be involved. I mean, again, to look to history with Whitewater and Watergate, those investigations sort of took on a life of their own throughout the process that no one, I think, could have truly anticipated in the beginning. And we've seen that in this past year alone with Bob Mueller's investigation, in the past 3 months alone especially. And I really think that in the coming months we're going to see it end up in directions and exploring these sort of tangential things and people that right now you and I will look back and we'll say we couldn't have even seen that happening.
Right. And it is 1 year now since the FBI's
Isn't
started.
that wild? It's been so long. It feels like 2 days.
Right. but again,
right.
It as we were talking yesterday, I believe, about this, if there were nothing there, if they said, "Oh, this is a waste of time,"
right,
they would not still be at it.
Right.
A year later, and instead of again winding down, ramping up, and impaneling a grand jury, seizing documents, getting people in.
Right.
Right. This is going to continue for.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see if any indictments will be issued or criminal charges, right? Because that's the whole point of a grand jury. That's what they can
Donald
do.
Trump is curious to see that too.